And they interview the Jewish people from Israel, and they're like, we have a right to Jerusalem. It's in this book, in these papers, it's in the Bible. We have a right to this land. It's our land. And then it goes ahead and shows all the ways that they're torturing the Palestinians, kicking them out of their land like an invading force, backing them up against the sea, not allowing them supplies, medical care, anything, destroying their civilization. And I'm like, wow, I didn't know that this was how the state of Israel was treating these people. This is terrible. But then, halfway through the documentary, they start interviewing the Palestinians. And the first few interviews that I actually sat through, they interview the Palestinians. And the Palestinians, we have a right to the land of Jerusalem. It's in such and such papers. It's in these documents. God wants us to have Jerusalem. And I'm sitting there thinking, okay, fuck you guys. Fuck you both. You're both idiots. So your buddy's moving away.
Yep.
Right after Halloween.
No, he's moving before. Right after Halloween. And when if he gets a house, he's going to go look at 8 houses, and he's going to make a choice. They're going to weigh it.
So, are you guys going to have like a Halloween party before he goes away? Are you going to celebrate?
No.
Let's say they were having a Halloween party.
Yeah. Would I show up?
Would you show up to a Halloween party? Because I think that I remember you saying you hate the holidays.
I do hate the holidays.
Why do you hate the holidays?
I don't feel like... I feel it's a trap, living a lie, and that's it.
Why do you feel like it's a lie?
Because we know the history of it. And you can't be free if you're going to connect with the world. You got to be a free thinker. You got to do what you got to do, and you got to have some truth in your life. If you have no truth, what do you got? You're going to follow everybody else? Just like the parents can't keep these holidays, and when the kids get old enough and they start to lie, where do they learn how to lie? They've seen their parents lie.
Well, there's a really good movie, Ricky Gervais starred in it. It's called The Invention of Lying. Have you ever seen it?
No.
Okay. So basically, he lives in a world where nobody lies. Nobody has come up with the concept of lying. So he figures it out first. So he walks up to this girl. This is one of the scenes. He walks up to this girl that he is very attracted to. And he says to her, if we don't have sex in the next 20 minutes, the world is going to end. And she says, oh my God, where can we go?
Right here.
So I think lying, the joke of the show, the movie, I think, is that lying is an innate part of being a human being. I don't think that you learn it. I think that it's something that you come up with as a survival strategy when you're very young.
Go back to Adam and Eve.
Well,
what did they lie?
Well, let's go back to the Bible. Who lied?
Yeah. So
who lied in Genesis? Who lied in the Garden of Eden?
It was Adam. Adam said, Eve made me do it. Because the snake lied to Eve, and Eve made Adam bite the fruit.
I think if you want to look at the story of Genesis and the Garden of Eden, I think the biggest liar in that whole group is God. I think God is the biggest liar because God said, do not eat of the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil.
Yes.
Otherwise, you shall surely die. But all that it did was give human beings the knowledge, the foreknowledge of their own death. They were already going to die, but now they know they're going to die. So what did God say to the other gods, which a lot of people don't know that this is in the Bible, that this is what it says? He says, we must, put them out of the garden. Yes. Because they have eaten of the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, and they have become like us.
Right.
And we have to kick them out of the garden, because if they eat of the tree of life, they're going to become just like us. First of all, who's us? Who the fuck is he talking to? Second of all, I think God is the biggest liar, because he was like, hey, don't eat from this tree. You're going to die. And then Adam and Eve ate from the tree, and then they became more godlike. And God was like, oh man, that's no good. They're becoming like us, whoever us is. I think God's the biggest liar in that whole scenario, don't you think?
Well, you got to remember, Satan was the most beautiful angel of all, and he commanded a lot.
Yeah.
And he got thrown out of heaven with 1/3 of the angels.
Right.
And he wanted to be like God. So therefore, he lied to Eve, which was the creation of God.
Right.
And I don't think God wanted the competition.
You mean the competition with Satan?
The competition with anything. I mean, look at Egypt. Their whole society was, the pharaohs were God.
Well, let's look at this for a second. If you look at Genesis, and what would the reasons be for God not wanting Adam and Eve to eat from the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and then the tree of life? And then let's compare that to the story of the Tower of Babel. And we were trying to build a tower that would reach the heavens. And God said, oh, that's no good. No. I'm going to confuse their languages so that they can't do it. And it's very funny to me that if you compare those two stories together, it seems like God is just very jealous of his power. He wants to maintain superiority over his creation.
Go back to the first commandment of the 10 Commandments. He's a jealous God.
What's the first commandment? I don't know.
Thou shalt not have any graven image of God but me.
Seems like he's a bit of a prick.
A king?
Yeah. It seems like there's definitely a kingly human ego going on there, don't you think?
Well, the humans were his creation. If God was there from the beginning, where did he come from? Or the old saying, did God come first, or did man create God?
Right.
And that be the problem.
So that's a good question. Who created who? Because a lot of people will say, oh, obviously God created man. I would say, no, dummy. Man created God. And I think it's a really good quote. Anton LaVey said it. It's because man has an ego. God is permitted to do all the things that man is not permitted to do in a civilized society. He can kill whenever he wants to. He can command slaughter. He can, if you go back to the Greeks, he can rape whenever he wants to. He's all powerful. And man would like to be able to do all these things. The ego externalizes itself, and we called that character God.
Well, in the early Genesis, you had pagan gods, and there was a lot of competition in there. When the Jews created their religion, they created one God. And that's when they said there's only one God. And that's what they believe, and that's what we have today.
So were the Jews? I don't know if this is correct. We could look it up. Are the Jews the first monotheists?
Yes.
So they were the
first ones that believe in one single God.
One singular
Everybody
God.
before that believed in different gods.
Which one do you think is a healthier practice for civilization?
I think it's a choice that you have to make in your life.
But I mean, for civilization as a whole,
there's just one single God.
Yeah, like which one do you think? Do you think that civilization would be healthier if people believed in a lot of different gods, or do you think that it's healthier for people to believe in one God? Because look at it this way, and you always say this to me, that religion is a form of control. So you
rules and regulations, control.
You see that. So do you think that it's better to have one God? Because if you have one God, you can have one priest. You can have like the Catholic Church. Right. You have one source of power. If you have a lot of gods, you have a lot of different sources of power competing.
One God gives you one set of rules. One set of rules is a lot easier to follow, but it means control. When you got many gods, you're free to do whatever you want.
Right.
So therefore, there is no civilization with many gods, because I'm God. I could do whatever I want, and no one's going to tell me what to do.
Right.
But if you have one God, one set of rules, it's like having you live in a country. That's the rules of the country. But religion controls people. The Jewish religion has 613 commandments, and it controls their life. Now the Christians
try following all those.
Well, that's just because they control their life.
Right.
Now the Christians, they follow the 10 Commandments, and they believe Jesus freed them from the rules of the Jewish religion, which may be so, but the mistake was in 150 AD, they were Christian Jews, and they still kept the Sabbath. They may have not kept the Jewish holidays, but they kept the Sabbath.
Well, it took a long time for the Christianity started off as a cult in ancient Rome, and it took a long time for them to establish their own practices. Actually, I don't think they really took off beyond a cult into religion until it was adopted by the Roman government.
That was
with what's his
Constantine
face?
The King.
Constantine.
He declared the Roman Catholic Church, after he absorbed all these pagans, and they incorporated all the pagan practices and the Romans, and they said, how are we going to control these people? Well, let's put them in one pot and let us offer them a religion that they could keep them.
So doesn't it seems to me, tell me if you agree with me, that having one God, monotheism, is essentially a way to centralize power and control in people's minds and in their lives.
True.
It seems to me that doesn't really have any spiritual benefit.
No,
I mean, that's arguable. We could have that conversation, but it seems to me that it was created because people want to have power.
That makes people civil towards each other and respect each other because they feel we have the same God.
Now, in the world, there's no other reason to go to war that's as popular as religious differences. Yeah. And you could argue that they're basically economic differences that are cloaked in religion. And if you say that, I would agree with you. But as far as the populace is concerned, most of the times why we go to war, it's historically, it's for religious reasons. And you can look at the war on terrorism, everything that happened with 9/11. And I mean, that is basically a modern day religious war. That was a crusade. The Muslims said, hey, America is the great Western Satan, and we're going to blow up your buildings. This is the narrative. This is the established narrative. And there's a lot of people that don't believe that that narrative is correct, that it may have been a false flag operation. I'm open to the idea, but it's impossible to prove one way or the other. But let's go with the established narrative. The Muslims attacked America because America's the great Western Satan. And then America said, okay, now we're going to have a war against the terrorists, but the terrorists is such a, what was the word you were using with your court case that you're going through right now? Ill-defined? Vague?
Vague.
So what's the difference between saying terrorist and somebody that has different ideas? Well, maybe Muslim. Maybe it's just a holy war.
Bin Laden did not attack the temple or the World Trade Center. I was there for the 2 bombings.
Okay.
The Saudis and the Jordanians went to school in Florida to fly in the airplane, but they didn't want to learn how to land.
Yeah, that's kind of weird.
So it was a flag that the FBI should have picked up, but they didn't.
Right.
Now, how come bin Laden's family flew out of Boston before that?
That's something that not a lot of people know. And this is established fact. This isn't a conspiracy theory that after 9/11, all planes were grounded in the United States.
What about
except for the ones that were flying a few select individuals out of the country. And who were some of those people?
All bin
Laden's family. Because bin Laden's family does most of their business in America.
Right.
They're all members of the board of the Carlyle Group.
Right.
And guess who else is on the board of the Carlyle Group? Bush Sr.
Right.
They're investment bankers. Bin Laden's family is completely tied up with the Bush family. And all the planes after 9/11 were grounded, except the planes that we needed to get bin Laden's family
sounds like a setup
out of the country. So to protect them. That's weird.
Well, what the first bombing, the Blind Sheik did the bombing of the first one in 93. They tried to blow up the basement. That ain't going to happen. I know, I seen them pour concrete for 7 months, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It's 11 stories deep. You're not going to take the building.
You were there. You used to work in construction.
I worked on it when they were building it.
Yeah.
And I went to the transit authority, and then I went when they collapsed it. So therefore, the Blind Sheik, I think, is still down in Cuba.
Okay.
And the bin Laden family became the... it's like
who is the Blind Sheik? I've never heard this before.
I forget his name, but he's the one that blew up the first one in 93.
Okay.
And he was one of the imams of one of the countries down there.
Okay.
But
down there in the Middle East.
In the Middle East, okay. All the Arabs are the same, and it ended up.
I love it.
They were not but tribes.
Yeah.
You just got to read the Old Testament, and then you're going to get a good idea of what it was about.
So do you consider the Old Testament actually historical record? Do you think that it's metaphor? Do you think that it's just a setup of practices in order to glue a civilization together?
I believe it's history that was there, and it is like the Jews, they did oral history and they keep their history. The Arabs, which is the first cousins of the Jewish people anyway, they're first cousins, and that goes back to Abraham and when they separated, but they're the same people and they're family. It sounds like a civil war to me.
Okay. So you think that everybody in the Middle East is kind of related in some way?
They are.
But it's just the different religions. You're saying, I think what you're saying, correct me if you think I'm wrong, what you're saying is that the different religions from the Middle East, which turned into Judaism and Islam, and to a smaller extent Christianity, are basically just a way for tribes that have been warring for
tribal.
tens of thousands of years,
Right.
or
And
10,000 years,
going on for 1,000 years. This old tribal.
to consolidate power to create kingdoms.
It's always been about power.
Okay.
That's why the Jewish temple, when they made a deal with the Romans conquered them. But the Jews in the temple made a deal with the Romans. Okay, you conquered us, but we got to keep our religion. We got to keep our control.
I think that's kind of a neat way of looking at it, because I've never considered that before. You know that I don't watch a lot of news.
Right.
I try to stay out of it because I think it's depressing and it depletes my energy. But an interesting way to look at it is, hey, these religions developed as a way, a form of cohesion to bring tribes together under a unifying leadership. Religion would be a really good way to do that, to create a civilized group out of different warring tribes. But basically what you're saying is it ended up splintering off into two groups. And the two main groups in the Middle Eastern tribes ended up becoming Judaism and Islam. Whereas if you look at England, we had a lot of different warring tribes with the pagans. We had the Gauls and the Druids. And eventually, somehow, the rulership of England came into being.
Right. They took over between the Scots, the Irish, the pagans, all of them, and they became the English Empire.
Right.
But
they didn't do that. Did they bring the tribes together? I'm not up on my history. Did they do that through religious control or through warfare? They did it through warfare. It was warfare.
The Druids kicked the shit out of the English.
Okay.
All right. The Roman government went into Britannia, and the Druids kicked their butt, and they left for 200 years. Then they came back with a bigger army, and they finally conquered the Druids. And King Arthur supposedly was supposed to be a Roman.
Now you're talking about King Arthur, and I know that you're big into the theory that he was a real person. Most historians do not agree with that.
I could only refer to what I read in history books.
It would be really interesting if King Arthur was a real dude. That'd be cool.
Yeah. But even Paul from the Bible, from the New Testament, he was in Britannia.
Okay.
So that's how Christianity got in there.
Right. Sure. So Christianity started with...
I wasn't there.
Was it Peter or Paul? Who was the first? Who's considered to be the first pope? It was Paul.
Paul.
And he was going around...
Peter was called the Rock. But Paul wrote most of the New Testament.
Okay. So it was... right.
And he kept that, but the thing is, they're all related. The Roman Empire didn't give a damn if you celebrate a rock. All they wanted was peace and your taxes.
Well, and that's where the Catholic Church comes out of. The Catholic Church evolved out of that shattered Roman political structure during the feudal age, because there was a huge power vacuum after the fall of the Roman Empire, and then we have the feudal governments of the English Isles, and we also have the Roman Catholic Church that rose up to... So with that huge power vacuum, there was an opportunity.
Well, it was all family, too. Most of the Roman Empire was related family. Most of the Jewish Empire was related family, and the Saudis have the same thing. So what it is political power and economics.
Yeah.
Empire.
The same thing it's always been throughout history. It's always been exactly the same thing. It's just power, money, economics.
And in the early 1900s, it was the Ottoman Empire.
Okay.
All right, that was the Turks.
Right.
And there was so much fight over Jerusalem. What's it worth? Nothing. That's what the Imam said.
Well, let's talk about this for a second. You're talking about that quote from the movie, I think it's Kingdom of God.
Kingdom of God.
With the guy who played Legolas in Lord of the Rings. What's his name?
I don't
The actor, the really good-looking guy.
I don't remember his name. I remember what the movie.
He's like way too beautiful to be in anything.
Yeah, well,
he's so good looking, it's ridiculous.
yeah.
Yeah, but so he starred in that, but he's talking to
He was talking to one of the head of the Temple of Night that was supposed to defend Jerusalem.
The guy with the mask who had leprosy. And he had the silver mask to hide his deformed face.
Yeah. He had the skin disease.
Right. And he asks him, because they're warring over Jerusalem, and he asks him, so what is it, at the end of the movie, I think, so what is it worth?
What is Jerusalem worth? He said nothing,
and the king says,
everything.
Nothing and everything. And let's talk about that for a second, because obviously there's a lot of fucked up shit going on right now in Israel. So I watched this documentary, and I can't remember who made it. It was from a journalist who I was introduced to because she was interviewed on the Tim Dillon show. And she did a documentary on the plight of the Palestinians and how they're basically being thrown up against the western wall of the state, and
Gaza.
There's nothing behind them but a sea. That's the Gaza Strip.
Right.
So any supplies that come in, Israel controls those supplies, and they're not giving them anything. They're squeezing them. And I was like, oh my God, that's terrible. And she showed how before Israel became a state after World War II, the Jews were there, and everybody got along, and everybody was fine. And the Palestinians were like, hey, yeah, come on in. You know, you're our brothers. You know, everything's cool. Everything's cool. And everybody got along. And then once the state of Israel was established, they became militant and they became land grabbers. And they pushed the Palestinians up into the Gaza Strip. And we have the situation that we have now. For some reason, they decided that, no, we own all of this. And if you watch the documentary, and I can't remember the name of it, and I'm too lazy to look it up, if you watch it on YouTube, there's a thing that comes up that says, hey, some of the information in this documentary is controversial. Are you okay with that? You have to click yes to watch it, which is fucking bizarre. And then you watch it, and they interview the Jewish people from Israel, and they're like, we have a right to Jerusalem. It's in this book, in these papers. It's in the Bible. We have a right to this land. It's our land. And then it goes ahead and shows all the ways that they're torturing the Palestinians, kicking them out of their land like an invading force, backing them up against the sea, not allowing them supplies, medical care, anything, destroying their civilization. And I'm like, wow, I didn't know that this was how the state of Israel was treating these people. This is terrible. But then, halfway through the documentary, they start interviewing the Palestinians. And the first few interviews that I actually sat through, they interview the Palestinians. And the Palestinians, we have a right to the land of Jerusalem. It's in such and such papers. It's in these documents. God wants us to have Jerusalem. And I'm sitting there thinking, okay, fuck you guys. Fuck you both. You're both idiots, a worthless patch of desert, and you're fighting over it based on books that are thousands of years old, has nothing to do with what's going on in the world now. Fuck you both. And I turned off the documentary because I was like, first I was saying the Jews are doing some terrible things. And then I saw them interview the Palestinians. They were saying the same bullshit that the Jews were saying. I was like, you know what? I don't fucking care anymore. Fuck it.
According to the Old Testament, the kingdoms that the Jewish people were in, like Babylon, Alexander, and all those empires at that particular time, Persia, we're talking about kingdoms that are gone now, but they were actual kingdoms back then.
Right.
And they're in the Old Testament, and that's what the Jews believed. Now, the Muslims believe in what Allah told them, and it's a fight among families on control.
It seems that way if you look at it from that
It's a
perspective.
civil
It
war.
kind of makes sense.
But the thing is, one person said, well, in the Old Testament, we have all these things, and there was no such thing as Palestine. And then the Arabs came by, and they made their own books.
Okay.
But they're still related. Now, when the Ottoman Empire was running it, the Turks, they were terrible people also, but they kept order.
I think that anybody that takes control and keeps order, if you paint with a broad brush, it's very easy to call them terrible people.
Right. Remember Tito back in 1950 to 1990. Tito.
Who's Tito?
Yugoslavia. No, he ran Yugoslavia, Serbia, Bosnia, all that country.
I don't know who that is.
Tito was a dictator in Middle East Europe,
Okay.
around Yugoslavia, Serbia, and all that.
Okay.
And when he got done, then everything started breaking loose. But he controlled things. If someone has to control the neighborhood.
It's funny that we always have these gangsters that control us, and we need that in order to be a civilized collective. It seems like it's so necessary to have these power brokers in place that all have the same personality. They're all gangsters.
Yeah,
they all want to rob us. And we need them.
It's a control situation. Now, during the Depression, the gangsters did prostitution, gambling, and booze. When Prohibition was done, they went into labor unions, pizza shops, all kinds of things, and you got pizza. But they had enough money to buy off the politicians,
right?
And they were no different than those people. This country, in the same aspect, what we did to the American Indians was a shame. Did we not push them off their land?
We did exactly the same thing here in America that it seems like perhaps the Jews are doing to the Palestinians.
Yes, because it's in human nature.
It seems that way. And going back to what you were saying with the mob, I'm always reminded of this line from Godfather 2. Where who's the guy, the Jewish guy that
Merrill Linsky.
What?
Merrill Linsky was the bookkeeper for the mob.
No. In Godfather 2, the movie. Hyman something?
Hyman, yeah.
The
Jewish guy.
So he looks at Michael and he clasps his hand in his and he says, "Michael, we have the money to decide who's going to be president. We're bigger than U.S. Steel." Right. And that got me thinking, oh my God, it's possible, not only possible, but probable that our political class is directly related to the higher echelons of the mafia.
Kennedy was directly hooked up with one of the gangsters. I forget his name, but he was like a power broker in the White House.
Okay.
The Kennedy was a bootlegger in the 30s. Every bottle of scotch that comes in this country, the Kennedys get $1.
Is that right? The Kennedys, the Kennedys were bootleggers?
Yeah, they were bootleggers.
Because I know that the Bushes were bankers that actually laundered Nazi gold during World War II.
Yeah.
And George Bush Sr.'s grandfather was prosecuted under the Trading with the Enemies Act.
Right.
So that's actually a matter of historical record. That is not a conspiracy theory. That's the way the Bushes made their money. Right. They laundered Nazi gold. So you're saying that the Kennedys got their fortune from bootlegging?
Yes, that was it. And they went into politics in Boston.
Well, if you have enough money, why wouldn't you get into politics? I would personally, and we've had this discussion before, because personally, I have no desire to control other people. It seems like a lot of responsibility that I don't want, and I don't have the time.
Do you remember the movie Once Upon a Time with De Niro and this guy Ferrara, actor?
No.
No, this guy De Niro, they played a gang of kids back in the 20s, and they showed the bootleggers how to bring their booze in by putting time capsules on the booze, drop it off there, and they used to come with little boats and pick them up. And they started a bunch of kids, like a gang down the Lower East Side, and they became gangsters. Now, they robbed the New York State Reserve Bank of $20 million, and everybody ran, all except De Niro. De Niro took a vacation up to Buffalo, and he fell in love with an Italian lady that lost her husband, and he inherited a hardware store. This guy Ferrara went to California and was running for a senator or something, and they were investigating him. And De Niro, they had a mailbox somewhere in the post office, and they left 20% of their money there, and it got contacted. He got contacted to go to California, and Ferrara says, listen, they're going to investigate me. I can't allow that. They're going to investigate who I was. And he gave De Niro a gun. Know what to do. He said, I can't. And De Niro walked out, and this guy who played the gangster, he was killed and dumped in a garbage truck, crushed and taken away. De Niro played one of the gangsters named Noodles.
That's a great name.
Because he used to go down to Chinatown and eat Chinese noodles. And the second movie they made of that, he used to hang out in the parlor with the opium. But that they did another movie about it that sometimes you don't know what to believe. So, as far as gangsters concerned, we grew up with gangsters.
But it does seem like it's possible that our ruling political class nowadays, many of them have ties to illegal activity, and that's how they gained their wealth and their power in the first place.
Yeah, well, Donald Trump in the building industry. You don't have to deal with the mob in the building industry?
Ooh, that's a good fucking point. That's a good fucking point.
What about the midnight pours when they used to...
Especially in New York.
At 2 o'clock in the morning, you got a cement drum, and you throw somebody in there, and they become the foothold for the building. There's a lot of people that in New York City building, they are the foundation.
They are the foundation of the buildings.
Yeah.
Dude, you're looking at me super serious. I'm sorry. I'm laughing. That's funny. You know that's funny, right?
Yeah, no,
I know it's dark.
Right, but you know what?
If you knew somebody that got thrown in the cement truck, I get that it's dark. But it's kind of fucking funny.
I'll tell you what I grew up with. In 1967, in Mr. Lucky's, 2 brothers were killed. I was in high school then. And they were killed at Cypress and Hart Street. Then on the French Connection, Joe and Mary's sandwich shop, Galante was killed in the back. And Joe and Mary was involved with the French Connection. And that was in 71, 72. And then I moved over to...
Well, wait a second. Before we move on, because I'm not familiar with this, what is the French Connection? I never saw the movie.
When they were taking the...
I think it's
the heroin from France to the United States. The French guy went and bought cars over in College Point, wrecked cars, and they were shipping over to France, but they were shipping money over to France and bringing the heroin back. And that was in 71, 72.
So that's the French Connection.
And Gene Hackman paid the detective, Papa Doro.
So this is a true story. They actually did this.
Some people know about that.
All right.
Now, when I moved to Fresh Farm Road, I was 3 blocks from a coffee shop that was little connected.
All right.
And then I ended up marrying my Sicilian sweetheart.
And that's how you were introduced to the family.
No, I already knew some of them. But then I was on Liberty Avenue, and that was Gotti territory.
Okay.
And they were all around me, and I grew up with them. When I was a young boy, I worked in a butcher shop, and across the street was Vito's Liquor Stop. I worked for A&J Butcher Shop.
Okay.
And Nicky's dry cleaners. He was a bookie. He was something else. And we had this guy called the Baron. He was a meat inspector.
So basically all these businesses were just laundering operations.
Right, fronts.
Yeah, the butcher shop, they were just...
So when the Baron came in, who was a New York City meat inspector,
yeah, I
was told to get out of the back.
Okay.
And they did their business.
Okay.
The Baron was every foot of 6'7" and 290 pounds.
Jesus Christ, he's a giant.
A gorilla.
My God.
And then...
So what do you mean he told you to get out of the back?
No, because they were going to run their business.
Oh, in other words, we have to have a meeting. You need to get out of here. You need to get out of here now.
And then when I used to go to the Esquire Diner, John Gotti Jr. used to come in there with his 2 gorillas.
Okay.
And some of my wife's family was not allowed to attend the parties at all.
Okay.
The only time I met him was in funerals and sometimes burials.
Okay.
One of the aunts died, and Galante, who in the Bronx, up in the Yonkers, the godfather of the Yonkers, he was there, and I was doing my tax business. And
wait. What was your tax business?
I don't pay income tax.
I know you don't pay income tax. We went over that in NWONOW episode number 3, Death and Taxes. I know you don't pay income taxes. What was your tax business?
He wanted to see me. He said, I hear you don't pay income taxes. I said, right, it's illegal. I said, fine.
So the mob was very interested in that.
Yes. How did I get away with it? And they're always being shut up. So
because that's actually one of the biggest ways that the FBI gets the mob is through tax evasion.
Right, and CPAs. Now, the next night we had to do the burial. I gave him The Federal Mafia by Irvin Schiff.
You gave him the book.
I gave him the book.
Yeah, that explains that book explains how paying income taxes is illegal,
right,
and how to file a 0 return, right. And you added to that by doing a tax statement that we have up online, and right. I'll put it in the links in the description for the video if you're interested.
And he said, "Do you mean my CPA and my bookkeeper screwing me?" I said, absolutely, they're part of the problem. I said, what should I do with them?
Dude, do you think maybe you got these people killed?
No. They said, what should I do with them? I said, get rid of them.
All right. What does that mean?
And he turned to my wife and said, is he kidding? My wife said, absolutely not. He means it.
So you started doing this whole thing with the IRS while you were still married to this young lady?
Yes.
And what was her reaction when you ended up embroiled in a very dangerous legal situation? You're married to a woman, and I knew you had a child.
No.
So that's
not with her.
Not her.
My son came from my first marriage from 1975.
Okay, so at this point, you have a child, but it's not her child.
No.
But you are married. And she's not working.
No,
you're working.
I was divorced in 75, 77.
So you're working. She's not working.
Right.
This is old-fashioned. I'm the man. I'm going to take care of the family.
Yeah.
And how did she react when you decided to start fighting the IRS, especially being basically she's part of the mob?
Her family, but she wasn't. Part of her family was.
But how did she react when you decided to take down the IRS?
Well, she didn't like the Italian guy.
Because it didn't do you guys a lot of good financially to start off with. How does she react?
No, I was doing fine because I still work for the MTA and I was still making a living.
But you were spending a lot of money filing suits.
Not too bad then.
Not too bad then.
After she died in 2001, that's when it really hit the fan.
That's when shit hit the fan.
That's when, because after she died,
okay.
All right, had nothing to lose and everything to gain.
That's when you decided to go balls to the wall.
That's when I said, like Harry said in Harry's War,
yeah,
I declare war on the IRS, and I did.
I gotcha. That was after your wife died.
It took me 15 years of research to get the information, put it together.
But you only decided to do it after your wife had passed away.
Right.
I didn't know that. That's interesting. So the reason, is it safe to say that the reason why maybe when you started that crusade against the IRS, and if anybody doesn't know what we're talking about, go watch episode number 3, Death and Taxes. Maybe when you decided to start that crusade against the IRS, do you feel like maybe you were pulling your punches a little bit to protect your wife?
No, I had my obligation to her while she was alive.
But do you feel like in your fight with the IRS, you were pulling your punches a little bit?
No,
until she died?
I was doing the research during that time.
Oh, okay. So that was just the research phase.
Right.
Do you think that if she had survived, if she hadn't passed away, do you feel like you would have fought them as hard and put as much of your life on the line as you did?
I don't think I would declare war on them, because if we were there, she's still alive, I didn't want to see her hurt.
Right.
But I'm by myself, take your best shot.
Well, I say that all the time for myself. You know, I don't have any children that I know of.
No, it's no responsibility.
I've never been married, and there's a very specific reason why I chose to live my life that way, although it does seem like it's less fulfilling in certain ways. As a creative person, I need to have that freedom. I need to spend a couple of $1,000s on ridiculous bullshit because I had an idea one morning when I woke up and I said, I want to start a podcast.
Good.
Totally irresponsible thing to do if you have a family.
Right.
I don't.
You can't do it because they got control over you.
I don't have a family. I don't have the responsibility. I can do whatever I want. So that makes sense to me, what you're saying, that if she had still been alive, you probably wouldn't have
I would have not done
fight.
what I had to do.
Okay.
Because when you're responsible for somebody, you do it 100% or you don't do it at all.
Do you think that that pain of suffering her loss kind of motivated you because you were angry and you just wanted to fight somebody?
No, I was set up already. It was all set up, and all I had to do was pull the trigger.
But you didn't pull the trigger until she passed away.
Because, after she went, then I pulled the trigger.
Right. But you didn't know that she was going to pass away. She wasn't sick when you started, so it was just kind of...
I did know she was going to pass away.
How long was she sick for?
2.5 years in hospital with diabetes.
Oh, shit. Okay.
Ate her body away.
All right. I gotcha.
I had to pull the plug. You tell me that's not tough. She didn't want to be on machines. Remember the story about Carolyn Quinlan in Jersey? 10 years on the machine with her husband?
No.
And when he pulled the plug on her, the family went after him, and they didn't realize she would have not been a human body. It would just been a body on machines, like a robot. And that's no life. Life is when you got your brains going, your heart going, and you have some kind of respect. When you have someone dying for you.
Did you guys have a conversation before she got sick about And is
Her
that
grandmother
that's
died
what is
on a
that?
machine.
Is that
on a
that?
machine.
So she wanted you to
She
do
told
that?
me point blank, I don't want to die on a machine like my grandmother did.
Well, I'm going to tell you something. If you're, in my opinion, if you had to do that and that's what she wanted, because that must have been very hard to do. You must carry a sense of guilt.
Guilt comes with life. I'm sorry it happened that way, but it was her wish not to live on a machine.
I'm saying if you live with that sense of guilt.
Yeah, it is pain.
But you did it.
I only had 10 good years with
You
her.
fulfilled her wishes.
Yeah.
In my opinion, that's heroic. In my opinion, that's heroic because you did something that was extremely painful for you to do, but you were fulfilling her wish. And I think that's amazing.
No, it's called respect. Respect for the person, what they want.
Exactly.
And even her family recognized that. We had over 350 people show up at the funeral.
That's awesome.
And you know
well, that's because her family was connected.
She had a big family. They had a lot of kids.
Yeah, she had a big family.
And now
we had a lot of uncles.
So you know the Italians, when they do a funeral, they put out these great big wreaths, beautiful wreaths and all.
Sure. I have Italians in my family in West New York and Jersey.
My mother-in-law said,
I get it. It took me a long time to figure out my family was connected, but I've been to the funerals.
My mother-in-law said, I sent Paula $1,500 in the hospital. Did you got it? I said, I haven't found anything. So when I came back and I found the money in there. Now, I returned it to my mother-in-law. They didn't need the money, but I returned it to them.
Okay.
She gave it back to me because I was honest enough to return it. I gave my mother-in-law $45,000 worth of jewelry that she had.
Okay.
And
why would you do that? I mean, that's your wife. You're entitled to whatever she left behind, don't you think?
No. I have
that's
no
the way I look
jewelry,
at it.
And I'm made that way.
You are. You're very giving.
Now
I spent 7 years with a woman. We were never married, but when we decided to break up, I said, I'm keeping the furniture. Fuck off. So maybe that's shitty. I don't know.
Well, she gave me the money back, and I went out and bought a wreath. My wreath stood out of all the wreaths.
Okay.
But it was not pretty with a lot of flowers. It was a simple cross. And it stood out among all of them. It was a very simple message.
What was the message? Why did it stand out?
Well, the first night, her cousin, who's a principal of a Catholic church, a Catholic school, she said, I just got into a room, dark room. I had to sit there and prayed and meditate.
Okay.
And when I was the first one to speak, the very last one to leave, and I told them, do not weep for her. She is in the hands of Jesus now. She's no longer suffering.
That's
the disease has killed her, but she's now free.
In the hands of Jesus.
Yeah.
Do you believe that?
I did that for her family because they are Catholic.
That makes sense.
And
to ease their pain.
To ease their pain.
Okay.
My brother-in-law walked up to me and shook my hand.
Right.
He didn't like me at first. Because when she first
brother-in-laws generally do not.
Right. They got to protect their sister.
Of course.
He wanted to come after me. When she first dated me, and he was warned, don't go after him because you ain't going to make the first 4 steps on his steps because he's going to put a hole in you.
Okay.
Well, back then, I was known as the gun runner on TV radio.
There's a... Dude, okay, so there's a photo that you have with your gun collection when you were 30? You look like you're maybe 30, 35 in the photo.
Yeah, like that.
Yeah, and it's a New York apartment, a tiny little apartment, and you got all your guns out on the couch. And I have to say, having known you for quite a number of years now, this pales in comparison to the arsenal that you have collected now.
Well, have you ever heard of anybody in the city of New York have a Class 3 license for a machine gun?
Not in New York. No.
I did. I had it since 1978.
So you kind of got grandfathered in past all the Democratic bullshit? Yeah.
So that was my business back then. They couldn't figure out what I was doing. I had my own little game going.
Well, the reason why you ended up doing things that were, generally speaking, I don't want to say that they were illegal, but generally speaking, they were not kosher.
Well, of course not.
So the reason why you ended up in that predicament is actually because you had a lien placed against you by the IRS, and you were only given...
That was in 2006.
$75 a week? Was that it?
No, that was going back to 1984, when I had $75 a week for 3 years, and I supported my father and my son.
That's crazy. So you basically had to do whatever you had to do to make money off the books.
I had to use my knowledge of what I knew to survive.
Right. Now at this point your wife had already passed away?
Yeah, 2001.
Okay. So she had passed away. Now what caused the IRS to act against you? What happened?
Well, I started a church. I studied religion.
Okay, I'm glad we went there.
And I had all Catholics in my church, and I was teaching them the Bible.
Okay.
And the IRS didn't believe them. And the thing is, they're a bunch of gangsters anyway.
I get that.
So therefore, and I learned that they were the enemies of the people. And you know what? It is what it is. So it ended up that they kind of forced me into going back to the old ways. The old ways.
The old ways.
Right.
Off the books commerce.
Off the books. We learned they lied to us way back in 64, 65 during Vietnam.
Sure. Oh, the government? The government lies constant. That's their entire... That's their stock in trade.
Right.
They have to lie. They have to lie to keep order.
Right.
I don't even hold it against them. What pisses me off is people that don't know they're being lied to. Because I look at those people and I say, are you a fucking child? Pretend that you're in power. Of course you have to lie.
Well, they lied about Cambodia. They lied about the Khmer Rouge. They lied about a lot of dirty ops operations there. And it was just about money. They wanted to get the petroleum off the southeast coast. They wanted the rubber from the Vietnam for tires.
Right, you told me about that, yeah.
Then they were involved with the Golden Triangle of drugs.
Right.
So therefore, it was business. It was all CIA bullshit.
Right.
And when I came home, and my friends that were coming home, they were like 21 years old. They were coming home in coffins.
So you coming home from Vietnam really opened up your eyes to, hey,
what are we doing here?
I tried, because your parents' generation was World War II.
Right.
And that's the greatest generation.
My father was in the Philippines. the Army Air Corps in 1943.
Okay.
And what he's seen with the Japanese, he would never tell anybody.
Right. But you came home from your stint in the Navy.
Yeah.
And
I was never in a battle
and
zone.
I get that. You were a cook.
Yeah.
But you realized I've been lied to, and that basically metamorphosized into your war on the government and the IRS.
Right.
Is that fair to say?
That's fair to say, because the government is taking our young men, sending them to foreign lands to die for rich business people in this world. And the politics.
Hey, do you think we're still doing that?
Yes.
Is it possible that the war in Ukraine...
We're in 25 different countries. We just had a seal die in Africa. And I'm not talking about the ones that swims in the ocean.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Navy SEAL just died in Africa,
right,
because they're chasing the terrorists.
Right. The terrorists.
No, that's the way they operate.
Right.
I love this country, but I hate this government.
That's fair.
The government is corrupt.
That's fair. Now, how do you think this government right now uses, because it's kind of weird, how do you think this government right now uses religion to control the population?
There's a thing called the Illuminati. It's called the Catholic Church.
Okay.
They control the brains, or your thinking, or your control of your rules and regulations.
All right.
England controls the finances through the banking system.
Okay.
And the United States is the muscle to enforce it.
And these are the 3 places in the world that are corporate entities that are outside of governmental structure. DC, the City of London, and the Vatican are corporate structures that are outside the legislation of the external governments within the property that they exist in.
Right. Now, here's what the American people better learn. The lawyers in this country belong to the bar. What is the bar? British Accredited Registry, a.k.a. Lawyers Guild of Great Britain, and they violate the 1938 Foreign Registration Act.
Now, I'm glad you brought this up, because I actually looked into this, and there's a lot of people that say that's fucking bullshit and it's nonsense.
Oh, really?
So, where did you get this information?
Oh, I got that going back to 1869.
So you
and
have
1871, when the Washington, D.C. became a corporate state for the corporation and not a country.
So you have...
That's why they call it a district, not a state.
Do you have copies of legal papers that prove this?
Oh, yeah.
Or were you just watching, YouTube videos and being oh, that makes sense?
No, I got 1995 papers from the state of Delaware that says the United States of America Incorporated is on the stock market. Your birth certificate hooks you into the government.
Right. You were telling me about that.
Right. Your Social Security is hooked up to the Queen of England.
Right.
And this is 20 years of study. And I went to the records and I did that.
Okay.
I have a friend that, well, he's dead now, but he was in the law that never was. William Benson was a revenue agent for the state of Illinois.
Okay.
He went to Washington, D.C. and got the actual vote from 1913, and the vote was never properly ratified.
Vote for what?
Income tax.
Okay.
Now, I gave you a copy, and I showed you in 1913, I showed you that law that said they exempt all federal banks from paying income tax.
Yeah. Do you have that?
Yeah, I have that.
So what you showed me.
You want a copy?
Well, you printed it out. You showed it to me.
Right, I got copies.
It was basically exempting the Federal Reserve from paying income tax.
Right.
So the funny thing is most people think that the Federal Reserve, because it's called the Federal Reserve, is a part of the government. It's not.
No.
It's a private corporation. Right. It's a private bank. It's about
it's
as
a money
federal.
Cartel.
It's about as federal as Federal Express.
Right.
It's a private company. It's a private bank, and they issue currency to the American government on interest, which it can never pay back. Right. And that's called the fractal reserve system. So you showed me that this private corporation in the legislation that established it is actually tax exempt.
Right.
And all of the income taxes that we pay, most of them, if not all of the income taxes that we pay, according to you, illegally, actually just go to pay the interest on the loans that the Federal Reserve gives to the government. That's crazy.
And FDR in 1933 sold the American people to the international banks as collateral on the loan for the Depression. So when you get your birth certificate, you become cargo to the ship to the bank. Because birth means ship, cargo, back in 1700.
Yeah, and we did talk about this in the last podcast that we did together, episode number 3, and I did I pointed that out. I think that the let's go here. Let's do this real quick. I might cut for time, but I want to show everybody this video. So let's go here. Let's go here. And let's go over here. If you go to our page and you go to videos, and if you want to look at playlists, it's under podcasts. Or it's probably under I don't know.
I think you.
But either way, oh, here it is. Does your government consider you cargo? 15 minutes and 25 seconds. It's this one right here. And you can go watch that. And I actually thought that was interesting enough that I wanted to make a clip of it. So that is up for anybody that's interested to watch. You talked about that at great length. We discussed that for about 15 minutes, that the government actually, as the U.S. as a corporation, considers its population to be cargo, and legally we are considered cargo that can be insured in order to take loans out against through the Federal Reserve. And your birth certificate makes you not a citizen. It makes you
stock to the company.
Stock to the company. That's a good way to put it. Yeah. So we went over that. That's in, as far as I'm concerned, in episode number 3, all the things that we discussed, all the things that we went over, that seemed to me to be the most evil and insidious thing that our government has done to us, because they can leverage $1 million per person. That was the deal that was struck.
That's under the Cisco Act. And that's a corporation that's down in Maryland or Delaware. And it's another corporation.
Okay.
I went down there.
So is that an insurance corporation?
No.
What's their business?
It's a bond, like a bond agent.
Okay, a bond agency.
And I went down there to their office, and I wanted to see my account, which is worth over $1 million. And the woman looked at me like I had 3 heads and I just came from Mars. And I just showed the paper.
There might be a few reasons for that. What? Either you're way off or you're way on. It's one or the other.
One or the other. But like I said, they said they couldn't find it. There's no such thing. I said,
but... And you did this. You filed a paper with the government because, and I discovered through looking through your paperwork that you gave me in the last podcast we did together, that on legal papers, when they spell your name in all capital,
yes,
the same way that they do on credit card applications, and things like that.
Right.
Anytime you apply for credit through a
Right.
bank, or if you have any legal contracts, they spell your name in all capitals. And most people will look at these papers and just be like, oh, they just want my name to stand
Right.
out. No. When they spell your name in all capitals, that's referring to the
Corporate citizen.
the fictitious entity.
Fictitious straw man to the corporation.
The fictitious entity in the corporation. So if your name, let's say your name is Harry Weinstein.
Oh, okay.
We'll make you Jewish.
We may be.
All right. Your name's Harry Weinstein. So when you have a legal document or you're applying for credit, Harry Weinstein is all in caps. And you as a person are looking at this document saying, oh, they just want my name to stand out.
Right.
But that's not it.
No.
When they have your name all in caps, they're referring to the corporate entity, the fictitious name that's based on your citizenry. But it's not, you're not a citizen in this contract. You are a corporate construct.
Right. Like you are a business. You have your LLC.
I did and I do.
You have your S corporation.
No, I had a sole proprietorship.
Okay, so your accountant knows how to work this.
I never paid taxes. He did a great
job.
Right,
but he knows how to work it.
Right.
Because he's part of the problem.
I don't disagree with you, but I do love my accountant, and if you're still alive, I love you.
Like I said, he created a job for himself. Just like H&R Block's got millions of people doing the 1040 every year.
Right.
And I show people how to not do the 1040.
But it's interesting that when your name is capitalized on a contract, it's referring to the corporate entity, not the person.
Right.
Not the citizen.
Not the citizen.
That's weird.
No. Now, you can sign UCC code 1308A, and you could reserve all your rights under the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, which you're breaking the contract with them.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the problem. If you break the contract with them, most of them people don't know that.
Right.
But it took many years how to study this and go about it.
So that's what you're calling applying. You have to sovereign citizenship.
Right.
So in order to dissolve the fictitious entity,
right,
that is, and when I say fictitious entity, you guys have to look in the business law a little bit. So when I started my first business, what I had to do was I had to file a DBA with the county clerk's office. That DBA stands for doing business as. Doing business as establishes a fictitious name. So let's say I wanted my fictitious name to be Big Bird Incorporated. Okay. So Big Bird Incorporated is it's not incorporated. So let's just say it's Big Bird. Okay. Big Bird is going to be my DBA, doing business as. That's a fictitious name. So I established that with the county clerk. Now I can open up a bank account under the name Big Bird. Doesn't have to be my name, Hatman. It can be Big Bird. So people can write checks to Big Bird. And the reason why I did this is because I figured that doing sales, most people would be more comfortable buying product from me if they could write checks to a business name rather than Hatman Smith. Doing that, it seems like I don't know if I'm getting screwed here. Am I actually going to get my product? So in doing sales, I wanted to have a DBA. I wanted to have a fictitious name. It made sense. So people are more comfortable writing a check to Big Bird because it's a business name. They figure you're legit. That's why I did it. So it cost about $50 or something. I filed the DBA, doing business as. That's a fictitious name. And then I can accept checks through my bank account made out to Big Bird. They go into my bank account. So what you're saying is that with the birth certificate and the social security number,
that's the hook.
You are basically already a fictitious name when you're born and you go through
Right.
that process.
If you were born in the mountains, in the Ozarks, and you lived among these rednecks up there, and you weren't born in a hospital, you were born in the house. You got no birth certificate. There's no record of your birth.
Right.
All right? But if you go outside that society, they're going to say, oh, well, who are you? Well, I'm so-and-so. I was born somewhere around the springtime of 1970.
Somewhere.
Well, where's your birth
Somewhere around
certificate?
there.
Never had one.
Right.
Now they ask for birth certificate to get your driver's license, a bank account, anything. And that's the hook that they do. Do you remember when Joseph and Mary had to go to Jerusalem to register parents and register Jesus as their child? And once a year they go down there. The Romans said you have to register.
No.
And that was for tax reasons. That's the same thing they do. So it's an old ancient thing that they do. And they tell the doctors, you got to give them a birth certificate. What if you don't want to give a birth certificate? The doctors are going to fight you because they don't understand. They don't understand the rights of people. Well, I don't want a birth certificate on my son. Now, there is a thing of a live birth versus a birth certificate. They're totally two different things.
They're two different things?
Two totally different things.
Okay.
A live birth from the hospital is that you were born in the hospital.
It's just a record that that you were born,
Mrs. Smith,
but it doesn't establish.
It don't establish the corporation birth certificate.
Okay.
Mr. and Mrs. Smith had a boy born on such and such time in the hospital. The name is John, and that's it.
Right.
A birth certificate is totally different. It is a certificate of cargo. And the doctors don't notice, or they go along with the program.
And what you're saying is that the reason why this happens is so that the government can borrow money from a private corporation that is known as the Federal Reserve. Because we become
a piece of stock.
We become basically collateral. We can become collateral for the
guarantee
loans.
on the loan against the international bank.
That's crazy.
But that's the way it is.
That's crazy. Well, I kind of figured that we'd end up talking more about this than religion. Well, but that's fine. But I do have to take a whiz. So let's take a quick break and we'll come back in a few minutes.
Yeah.
We'll be right back. Okay, so while we were away, you gave me the form that I asked for a few minutes ago, and this was Chapter 12 of the USC, Title 12, I apologize. Title 12 of the USC, Chapter 4, Subchapter 531, Exemption from Taxation. The Federal Reserve banks, including the capital stock and surplus therein, and the income derived therefrom, shall be exempt from federal, state, and local taxation, except taxes upon real estate. In other words, if they own a building or a structure, they can be taxed upon that, but they can't be taxed on the actual business that they do.
True.
That's fucking bananas.
That's the lie that's been set up since 1913. They've been lying to the American people for over 120 years.
All right. So,
let's get into the good stuff.
Let's get into the good stuff. So, basically, if you're going to paint with a broad brush, what we're talking about right now is methods that the elite use to control the populace, which are basically just barbarians and gangsters that we've decided to submit to in order to achieve a cohesive, civilized society. But they are raping and robbing us.
They are gangsters no matter what.
No matter what.
No matter what.
Whatever benefit we're getting from being under control, we are still at their whim and at their mercy. Yeah. So you had a Bible quote that I'm going to bring up on the screen right now. You don't have to. I know you have your Bible right there,
okay.
but you don't have to look it up. I'm going to put it on the screen. And this pissed somebody off quite a bit that we showed it to. Here we go. Here we go. All right. Are we ready? Here we go. So, here's the quote. If you're just listening, I have it up on the screen. If you're watching, Luke chapter 19, verse 24 to 27. This is Jesus talking about Jesus. So, hang on, there you go. Then he said to those standing by, take this mina away from him and give it to the one who has 10 minas. Sir, they said, he already has 10. He replied, Jesus, I tell you that to everyone who has, more will be given. But as for the one who has nothing, even what they have will be taken away. Verse 27, but those enemies of mine who did not want me to be king over them, bring them here and kill them in front of me. The words of our Lord. The words of our Lord, Jesus Christ.
The kingdom of God.
The kingdom of God. How beautiful. How beautiful that Jesus Christ was telling people, hey, if anybody didn't want me to be their ruler, bring them in front of me and kill them for my enjoyment.
That comes from the old Jewish text of the Talmud and the foundation of the rulers.
It's insane to me that when I show people things like this that proclaim to be Christians, it's in your Bible.
Yep.
So here's the Bible is the Word of God, right?
That's what they claim.
The Bible is the Word of God. So if it's in the Bible, it must be true. And I've had a lot of religious debates when I was younger.
Good.
And when you have an ego the size of a 16-year-old boy, you're going to get into arguments with people. So I had a lot of religious debates with people. And at that point, I knew the Bible pretty well because I was raised in a religious environment. So they always come back to the Bible's the Word of God. And it was written by man. It was written by man. God didn't write it. Yes, but God wrote it by inspiring men.
Right.
Man just was the hand. Man was the hand that wrote it, but God was the mind, is what they all say. Okay. If that's where we're going to go, why does this exist in the book?
Why is it written that way? With the old Jewish text of the kingdom of Jerusalem, they were for the kingdom of God, and you say a kingdom, that's an empire. And the Jewish rabbis had the political power over the people.
It's very strange to me that the people that are our leaders are by necessity people that want to have power over other people. And this verse, I think, points out that this has been happening for a very long time. It's people that are bloodthirsty. Now, it's interesting to me to consider, and I'm getting this quote or this idea from Anne Rice. One of her characters talks about personal power, having power over other people. And the idea or the quote goes something like this. The only reason why you would want power over other people is so that they cannot have power over you. Because personally, when I was a young man, I would have loved to be able to control everybody. I would have thought that was fucking great. That would be brilliant. But when I got older, I realized that would be extremely boring if I didn't get to witness what people are autonomously. So we are ruled by people essentially that want to rule. And I think that speaks, if you want to run for office, and all the politicians will always say, I want to help the people. I'm in a position where I can give back. Bullshit. You're in a position where you can take further advantage. They all say, or they all pretend, that they want to help the people. What they actually want to do is take advantage of the people. It's very obvious. Grow up. It's very obvious. And if you still have hope, and if you're still on the hopey, changey bandwagon, or make America great again, or build back better, whatever your fucking slogan is, grow up. They're here to take advantage of you. And this is thousands of years old. And your Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, said, and I quote, I tell you, to everyone who has, more will be given. But as for one who has nothing, even what they have will be taken away. But those enemies of mine, who did not want me to be king over them, bring them here and kill them in front of me. The word of our Lord. Anybody who wants power, anybody who wants to be king, has a defect of personality. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. Well, you want to see Moses?
Let's talk about Moses.
Yeah, it's about Moses in Deuteronomy.
Deuteronomy.
Okay.
What do you want me to read?
About the when you attack a city.
Oh, okay. When you march up to attack a city, so this is the Lord talking to Moses.
That's the Lord talking to Moses.
Lord talking to Moses. In Deuteronomy, chapter 20, verse
10.
10? Yeah, you're right, 10. When you march up to attack a city, make its people an offer of peace. If they accept and open their gates, all the people in it shall be subject to forced labor and shall work for you. If they refuse to make peace and they engage you in battle, lay siege to that city. When the Lord your God delivers it into your hand, put to the sword all the men in it. As for the women, the children, the livestock, and everything else in the city, you may take these as plunder for yourselves, and you may use the plunder the Lord your God gives you from your enemies. This is how you are to treat all the cities that are at a distance from you and do not belong to the nations nearby. Now, I thought this was interesting, because this is the next verse. You don't have it highlighted. I thought this was interesting. However, in the cities of the nations the Lord your God has given you as an inheritance. So first, he's saying, hey, you can take the women and children, do whatever you want with them, kill all the men. Don't kill the women and children, but do as you please. Here's what he says about the nations. The Lord your God is given you as an inheritance. Do not leave alive anything that breathes. Completely destroy them. The word of our Lord.
that's the Jewish mentality back then. Let's apply it to today. Okay, these so-called righteous people called the government is out to destroy you. If you disagree with them, they can lock you up. They will kill you, or that you will disappear. Certain countries, if I was in certain countries like Russia, China, Iran, or any of those countries, I would not be sitting here.
Right.
I'd be dead in a gulag.
Well, there's a great quote. Anton LaVey said it. Those who wish for the law of the jungle would probably be first to end up in the belly of a tiger. And that's a good point.
Like I said, that's from the Old Testament. Now, if we are supposed to be civilized, we're still engaging in warfare.
Yes, we are.
Nothing has changed. The human nature of the human being has not changed. We're doing the same stuff over and over again, just repeating it. It's just that we have a different label, different country, different language, but we're doing the same thing.
Why do you think it is that human beings refuse to grow up? Why do they need a mommy and daddy figure, a government, a boss, to tell them what to do so that they feel useful? It seems to me that most people need that. Why do they refuse to grow up and take responsibility for themselves?
Was there fear, responsibility, not testing yourself for what you're capable of doing? Growing up, you got to take your lumps. You get into a fight, you learn how to fight, or you take a beating.
It's only pain. Pain doesn't last forever.
No.
It's only pain, and it helps you grow. I don't see why people are so afraid of pain.
People don't like pain because it's ugly.
It's certainly ugly.
But there's nothing you can do about it.
But there's nothing to be afraid of.
I think of the guys that in World War II, when they hit Normandy Beach and that flap came down off the LST and that German buzzsaw opened up and took the first row of people down. They were brave people. They believed in what they had to do.
I would say they were foolhardy.
Well, but we had an enemy, a common enemy.
Well, let me say, just personally, I would not have been there. I would have rather gone to jail than go there.
Your choice. So that takes courage too. Jail is no fun.
It's no fun.
If anybody that goes there, it's no fun. Society within society, and
well, John, Talking Head number 5, he got a promotion. And I were talking about this on the last podcast, number 8, Sex and Violence. We didn't broach this subject, but I think it's worthy to bring up now. Sex is ridiculed. Sex is taboo in our society, but violence is okay. And I think that the reason why society sets it up that way is so that they can convince you to do violence or have violence done upon you when it suits their interests. But if you were to give people sexual freedom and sexual liberation, there's an old saying, and I forget whose quote it is, the bedroom is the opera of the poor man. So you get to enjoy the splendors of human life in the bedroom. But that's taboo. But violence, as long as you're doing it for the right reason, that's okay. And this goes back into Christian ideology big time, because they'll say that suicide is a sin. The Roman Catholic Church at least says that. Suicide is a sin, but dying for a cause, being a martyr, which is basically suicide, isn't it? I mean, if you're walking into a situation where you know you're going to be killed, but it's for a religious ideology, then it's okay.
Yeah.
So you can kill yourself if it's for us, but if you're just killing yourself because you're in pain, that's a sin.
Well, you go to the crusade, you go to the children's crusade when they sold the children to the slave masters.
Well, a lot of people don't know about the Children's Crusade, so why don't you talk about that for people that are watching?
I believe it was around the Second Crusade to free Jerusalem, and the Catholic Church took all the orphans and sent them from Italy over to so-called Israel land and to free Jerusalem. They were met by the Arabs, the people there, and sold into slavery. And it was arranged.
So basically what happened was the Roman Catholic Church under Pope Pius, I think it was the 10th, I'm not sure. I think it was Pope Pius, took orphans, created a Christian army out of children,
right,
and said to the populace, the innocence of the children will free the city of Jerusalem, because even the Muslims are not evil enough to kill children. And then he sent children into warfare, and the Muslims captured all the children and sold them into slavery and prostitution. And then the Pope got to turn around and say to his flock, how evil are these Muslims? They took our children and sold them into slavery and prostitution. But he already knew that was going to be the result. You can't send an army of children against Muslims. At that time, they were the most advanced army in the world. He knew that was going to happen. It was a political maneuver, and he sacrificed thousands of children in order to make a point.
We have children's armies today in Africa.
In Africa, sure.
And in Asia, we had a children's army in Vietnam. We had a little general who was 17 years old, and he commanded like 3,000 of his troops. They were all children.
Right.
All right. So that hasn't changed.
It hasn't changed. It's
But
just a little more off the radar than it used to be. But when they did the Children's Crusade, it was a fundamentally, it was like media. It was like in the news. Everybody knew about it. And he was like, even they aren't evil enough to destroy innocents. When in sending a child army against the most advanced army in the world, you're the one sacrificing children, motherfucker. But then he gets to turn around and blame the Muslims.
Right. In the Middle East war, I could take a 12-year-old kid, blindfold him, and he'll field strip an AK-47 and put it back together.
Right.
You can't do it.
No, I can't. No. I've never even held an AK-47.
Oh, there's one right behind you. Here.
You hung it up. I didn't.
Yeah.
I've never held it. Okay. Just for anybody watching, there it is.
And we got a Sega 72 round 9mm.
Yeah.
Knife from 1919 from Finland.
Yeah.
And if you get caught in Jersey with that, you're going to jail for 25 years.
Right. So what you're saying is these children in Africa, they can take this apart and put it back together blindfolded. They are trained from birth, and it's no different than what happened back then.
No,
it's the same thing.
Now, there's another thing. With the lawyers, the Esquire, you know what Esquire is?
No, you told me, but remind me.
The knights used to fight the battle. The Esquire were the armor bearers, and during the battle, when they had the battle, when the knights fell off the horse, they had so much armor on, they couldn't get off. These little squires used to come in the side and stab you in the side with daggers. They took daggers.
The squire was there to help the knight, not kill him.
No, the squire is
The squire, the squire is the knight's assistant.
Right.
Right.
But he became to the foreign knights that fell down, the enemy. They used to
the enemy of his master.
The knights are the lawyers. Now we're going to go from knighthood days to England, and the barristers and the lawyers are the knights serving the king, and the esquires are below the lawyers.
Right.
So therefore, they until they gather, they grow into the next level. They were killing the knights that fell off the horse when the French and the English fought. That's where we got esquire from.
So that's interesting. Do all lawyers have the
titles?
Title of esquire?
There are different titles for different positions in the court.
But basically it's esquire?
The esquire...
Which is squire?
Well, it depends on what kind of lawyer you get. You got a lawyer, a counselor, and an esquire. And they all have a different function in the court system. The attorney is to separate you from your property.
Okay.
And that's his main job. Whatever. Separate you from your land or your money, whatever.
I love the way that you see the world. Love it. Keep going.
Because I studied the foundation of these things. If the people would go in and just go to the British Accredited Registry, aka Lawyers Guild of Great Britain, and go back to 1869 and go back to 1871 when this country was taken over, they will find that out. Now, if you approach a lawyer and say, "You remember the bar?" "Yeah, I've been on the bar." I said, "You're British Accredited, you're a British agent. You're a foreign agent in this country." They'll walk away from you.
Right.
Because you exposed them. And I have one guy that I'm teaching now, and he has tied the court up so bad they transferred his case from one county to an hour and a half way to another county.
Yeah, you told me about that. You guys actually had to drive an hour and a half to go to this court. Yeah.
Because Milford Court cannot deal with it because we got the conflict and the conspiracy in plain sight in that court.
So why did they transfer your case to a court that's an hour and a half away? Is because was it because that you accused, rightly so, the judge of not being a lawyer, he wasn't legally capable of handling your case?
Corrupt, false papers inside the courtroom. The lawyers going along with the program and the judge going along with it. It's called corruption. We got them dead. We got the papers to prove
Yeah, but why did they transfer it to another court?
Because the conflict of interest, they can't hold it in that court. They can't deal with it. There's a conflict of interest.
The conflict of interest between what parties?
The lawyers, the judges, and the homeowners association.
Okay.
It's been going on for years up here.
Okay.
But people don't study, and people don't know about it.
Is this a juried case?
What?
Is this a juried case?
No, they don't want to give him a jury case.
They don't want to give him a jury.
All right. Now, if it was a constitutional court, he would get a jury. Because under the Constitution, if you have a disagreement of, I think it's $2,500 or more, you automatically get a jury trial.
Okay. So let's talk about this. You and I talk a lot about people not taking responsibility for their own actions. Right. People not wanting to take responsibility for their own lives. People basically being children, needing a mommy or a daddy, and sometimes they externalize this as a god. Most of the times they externalize this as politicians or judges or lawyers. So let's talk about this in the lens of religion for one moment, and I think that this would be a good place to stop. Let's talk about this. I have a concept of Christianity, the Judaic Abrahamic religions, being Islam, Judaism, and Christianity, as basically fostering a concept that has popularly been called slave morality. The morality of the slave. And the Bible talks about this quite a bit. Give unto Caesar what is Caesar's. If you are a slave, do good unto your masters. And there's a verse that I looked up that I don't really feel like cutting, but I could read it. Dude, just do a Google search for fucked up, cringeworthy Bible quotes. You'll get a lot. I was going to read through a lot of them, but I think that it's better just to have a conversation. Slave morality. So if you were a master, in my opinion, if I was going to be the master of the world, here's how I'd set it up. I'd say, okay, everything that makes people feel good, I'm going to convince them that it's bad. And they have to do penance when they do the bad thing. But those are things that everybody always wants to do. You want to fuck? You're bad. You want to eat too much? You're bad. You want to hurt somebody that hurt you? You're bad. Let's make everything that people want to do all the time, let's make them bad. And let's make ourselves the authority that can forgive people for the sins that we created and thereby establish control over a population. The morals of the Bible don't seem to me to be anything other than the morals of a slave. If you wanted to enslave a population, you would make them feel bad about being themselves. Good job. Paganism celebrated life. Paganism told you, hey, whatever you're good. Paganism basically had the caveat, don't take the freedom away from anybody else. Do whatever you want, as long as you don't take that freedom away from anybody else. Basically. I mean, polytheism became very complicated towards the end of its rule, but when it started off, that was basically the basis of civilization. It was, do whatever you want, don't take that right away from anybody else. If you do, you're going to get hurt, because there was still violence in civilization. Now violence is bad. Ooh, now violence is bad. So basically, make everybody feel bad about what they want to do, who they are. And if you can do that, you can rule them. And I'm going to end my little rant on this. I used to get into arguments with Christians all the time. I used to work in churches a lot. That was part of my business. So you end up with people that are newly born again.
Born again Christian.
Yeah. You get the new born againers. You've experienced them. They're not fun. They seem to think that they got something to offer you that you can't live without. And it didn't take me very long to figure out how to squash their argument. It's a very simple way to squash the argument. If you ever have a born-again Christian come up to you and say, because it is a slave morality, and if you think through it, you can see why it is the way it is, what it's trying to do, and how it's enslaving you. So I had a woman come up to me, Jesus, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, hey, listen, I work in a lot of churches. I'm not going to have this discussion with you. She wouldn't let it go. She wouldn't let it go. It got to the point where I had to shut her down. Here's how I did it. I said to her, very succinctly, I said, you are not going to convince me that there is anything wrong with me. I was born perfect. There is nothing I need to ask forgiveness for, and there is nothing I need to be saved from. And that shut her down.
She's trying to put a guilt trip on you.
Well, if you don't believe in original sin, then there's no reason to adopt this ideology. You have to feel bad about yourself in order to want to be saved, in order to need a mommy or a daddy to be subservient to. You have to feel like you need correction, like
Well,
you
you're
need to be
incomplete.
corralled.
You're not a complete person.
Exactly. Why are people afraid to wake up? Why are people afraid to grow up?
They're incomplete. They're fearful. They don't want to take the responsibility. They don't want to see the ugly side of life. They don't want to experience real life. Real life has your ups and downs, and you're going to go for bumps. And it's a school of hard knocks, and they just don't want to learn. They feel complacent in the way they live, and they think they're happy. But, oh well, it's like a guy in jail. There's a loaf of bread here, and there's a key to the jail here. They'll go for the loaf of bread rather than the key to freedom.
Yeah, you gave me this metaphor before, yeah.
So that's what they do. They
Okay.
won't reach for the key. If you want to free yourself, it's going to hurt. You're going to go through some rough times because nobody wants you to be free. And if you do free yourself, you're going into a little area, and sometimes you may feel alone. You may not feel lonely, but you'll be alone because you're going to be isolated from the rest of the stupid people that are not going to look at their lives.
It's lonely. It's lonely to wake up in a land full of the sleeping. It's lonely because you look around and you just see people with their eyes closed. And here's what a person with their eyes closed looks like.
Yeah.
While they're walking around,
That smartphone is a trap.
they're just doing that. I mean, I've seen people walk into telephone poles, walk into traffic,
I've seen people get hit by the cars.
get hit by cars.
So, but that's the way people are today. Now, I know you haven't done a lot of camping.
A little bit.
All right.
That was my family's annual vacation.
I used
Actually,
to go
was
for
camping.
3 or 4 weeks in the woods by myself.
That's real camping. We did 3 days.
And I just sit there and I just meditated and I just looked around. I had no phone with me, and I carried a 100-pound pack, and I traveled 20, 30 miles into the woods.
Okay.
And I felt with nature.
Right. You connected to the fundamental
Being what you are.
What would you call the primal essence of being an animal. And we were talking about this last night. People don't have instinct anymore. They feel like their instinct is evil. And the way that I brought this up was to say, when I meet a new person, I have a gut reaction to them immediately. I know if they're trustworthy. I can tell if they're trying to get one over on me. I know what they're about. But it's an instinct. It's a gut feeling. But it probably takes me maybe a week or 2 weeks to figure out why that feeling is valid. But it starts off as a feeling. I don't think people have instinct anymore.
Negative is black and white, negative and positive. If you get a negative feeling about someone and you feel something, there's something wrong with that person. What are they after? They're like a con man.
Well, maybe.
Maybe. But if you
or maybe they're fine, but they're just not right for you. You're reacting to them, so maybe they're just not right for you, but most people don't have instincts. Did you know that in a scientific, I think it's a Gallup poll, I don't know, a survey, most people in America claim that they do not dream? Which means, to me, as a sorcerer, they don't remember their dreams. It's just there's a part of my life that's half of my life, 8 hours a day, 10 hours a day, where I don't remember any of it. Maybe it's a little too scary, but I don't remember it. I'm shutting it out.
You don't want the bad memories to come up.
And most people in America, along with that survey, that most people claim that they don't dream, most people say that they do not have an internal dialogue. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine a human being that doesn't have a voice in their head that's questioning what they do on a daily basis? I mean, it's got to be one of two things. Either they're so comfortable with themselves,
Complacency,
that they don't need to raise any alarms internally, or it's complacency. Like you just said, I'm thinking it's the latter.
It is complacency. Unless you got some bad nightmares or some pleasant dreams. And if you have pleasant dreams and you don't have no nightmares, that means you never lived. You have any nightmares?
I have nightmares all the time. All the time.
We have nightmares too. Do we act on it? We've been there. We don't want to see no nightmares, but they teach you something.
I have always felt attracted to fear. If I fear something, as a magician, as a sorcerer, as somebody who's trying to cultivate himself, I always felt that if I am fearful of something, that's something worthy of exploring. I want to know why I'm afraid of it and what it is. What is my relationship to the thing I'm afraid of? Why am I afraid of it? I'm attracted to fear. But I think that most people, as soon as they feel like they're afraid, they shut themselves off.
Well, I spent a lot of time in graveyards. I find myself at peace in the graveyard. And it's like a peaceful feeling that everything's all right. If you put me in a crowd, my radar goes on and it goes.
Yeah, oh yeah, sure.
My radar is tuned out real good.
Right.
And if I find someone that's ready to take me over, I got one choice: walk away from them or shut them down. It's running black and white. I don't run gray.
Right.
And if someone's lying to you, you better shut them down right away, because they're wasting your time.
Well, not only are they wasting your time, but they're draining your energy. They're vampirizing you. They're draining your life essence away from you, and they're using it for themselves.
No, that's the way it goes.
And I'm very happy that most people will not think about what we're saying to a large degree, because I do that, and I think that it's wonderful. But if you want to protect yourself against that sort of manipulation, you have to wake up. You have to wake up. You have to be open to things that scare you. Yet you have to face them. You have to remember your dreams. You have to have that internal dialogue. I think the only reason why most people in the survey said they did not have an internal dialogue and they don't dream is because they're so shut off from that because of fear that they just don't remember it. That's crazy. Because that's where creativity functions. That's how people become human.
I remember the good, the bad, and the indifference I did in my life. Some I'm ashamed of, and some of it's good. But that's being a human. And that's the problem. You got to remember the good part of you and the bad part. And then you decide which side you want to go. The guys with the bad part, if they continue it, they pay the price. You got to make a stand somewhere in your life. If you don't make a stand, you're going to fall for everything.
There's a parable about, I forget where it comes from, but it's called The Beast That You Feed. So it's kind of set up like this. There are two wolves that are yourself. And you have to decide which one to feed. You starve one, you feed the other. Do you want to feed fear? Or do you want to feed action? Do you want to feed complacency? Or do you want to feed cultivation? And I think that most people are so fucking asleep, they don't even realize that there's a contest within themselves for their very soul. If such a thing exists, it's for their very soul.
Your body, your memories, and your soul are three different things. What are you going to take with you when you physically die?
I would like to take my memories with me.
That's all we got.
Yep.
Your material wealth don't mean shit.
Let me say this. It's a hell of an experience, but it's short-lived.
What you take with you and what you leave behind is part of you with people that they remember you for the good you did. And or the bad. They remember Adolf Hitler because he's bad what he did.
Right.
Or they'll remember some doctor for curing cancer or Dr. Salk curing polio. Or a lot of scientists that did good for people. But you got to do one or the other. You got to make a stand in your life. Without making a stand, you're not worth a grain of salt.
You have to almost have faith. But you have to have faith in yourself. Not in a mommy figure or a daddy figure that's going to come down and save you. Not in hopey, changey, build back better or make America great again nonsense. You have to have faith in yourself. You have to have faith in your own capacity to cultivate your own talents and your own interests, to be focused on yourself enough that you know what you find beautiful, you know what you really relate to and what draws you magnetically. And you have to be comfortable with that. You have to be comfortable being what you are. And in being comfortable with what you are, you can possibly, if you have the strength and the will and the capacity, create your own world. And maybe other people would want to visit that world and enjoy it with you.
Is that word freedom?
I think that's what freedom is. What do you think?
Yeah, that's freedom.
That's freedom.
That's freedom.
I like that.
Do you want it? Or do you want slavery?
Let's end there.
Let them decide.
Let's end there. Thank you for watching the New World Order broadcast. We are coming to you live from the end of the world. And just remember, we're watching you too.
Someone is watching. There are strangers